Hello, this is Bonnie Jones, and I am currently looking for um, remote bookkeeping work. I have been a bookkeeper for many years. I am older, but I am in very good health and I have absolutely no bad habits. I have never been a drinker, a smoker, anything, no drugs, nothing like that, of course, and nothing that would keep me from being at work every day. I do need a remote, not because of any disabilities, but just because currently I do not have transportation, but I do have a home office that is fully equipped. And I graduated high school at age 16. I do not have a degree, but I started keeping books immediately. When I took the aptitude test, it scored me high in accounting, that's the field that I should pursue. And I did do that. And I worked under many accountants, which was very informative. I started out with handbook keeping, and I have currently used QuickBooks Pro for a few years. I started out in a paint and floor covering company, working with building contractors and also with body shop people, mixing paint and doing all kinds of things like that the contractors need. I also went from there to, and of course, I did the bookkeeping, and I worked there 4.5 years. I went from there to a cattle auction barn called the Four Seas in Clovis, New Mexico, and that was a very complicated set of books, and I did very well there. I went from there, I got married, and my husband was stationed in Temple, Texas, and I worked for Vance and Associates, which was an accounting firm at that time. I kept 13 sets of books by hand and worked full time. And beyond that, we moved a lot because Rusty was working for Fairbanks Wayne Division, and he just transferred constantly. So about every year, I was reapplying for another bookkeeping job, which at the time was very frustrating, but it turned out to be a good thing because I learned all kinds of bookkeeping depending on the type of company that I was working for. I went to work for Westerberg Farley in Lubbock, which was a food broker. I went from there to the Villa Inn in Amarillo when it was brand new, set up their books, and worked as their manager for most of the time that I was there, as well as their bookkeeper. And oh gee, I went from there to San Antonio. I set up a set of books and also a company, an office and everything for a business that Lyndon Johnson owned the last year and a half that he was in office. So that's very telling of my age. I'm 81 years old and still very much interested in this type of work. With Lyndon, the Judge Morrison was over his private business, of course, because presidents can't be doing anything like that during their presidency. And there were four or five attorneys under him. Their office was in Round Mountain, Texas, and we lived in San Antonio. So I set up an office and set up their books, and Judge Morrison had approved a purchase for a ranch in Old Mexico that belonged to the president of Mexico. There were thousands of heads of cattle on that ranch that had to be moved across the border, and at that time we dipped them, quarantined them for 6 weeks, and then we moved them to the Red River Cattle Company in Arizona that John Wayne owned, and they put them through the sales process. Then we'd move another 1,000 head, and after that, I had a baby, and I didn't want to. I wanted to be at home, so I set up a daycare for children under 3 years old in my house, and I did that for about almost 3 years, and it was licensed through the state of Texas. And then my husband decided he wanted a farm, so we went and leased a farm, and I still wanted to stay home with my daughter, so I drove a tractor, I learned to drive a truck, and I drove a combine with a 21-foot tandem. during those years, and also hauled anhydrous ammonia tanks and things like that. I just did things that would hopefully help him out. He did that only 1 year, and he wasn't interested in doing that anymore. So we moved to Oklahoma City. He went back to work for Fairbanks, and I went to work for Neil Balkin. He was the city councilman at the time, and he owned a siding company. So I took care of all the crews and set up the appointments and so forth, and did their bookkeeping. He was 4 years behind when I got there, and I got him all caught up. And a year later, we moved again. So we moved quite a bit. We went to Omaha that time, and Nebraska, and my husband was then a supervisor for the company, and he went into an office situation. He had worked in the field before. So I went in and sorted out their office. They'd had a bookkeeper there for 20 years who did not know to clean the files, and that she only had to keep 3 years, so she had 20 years of files in the files. So I set those up and went to one of their schools to learn their paperwork and train secretaries. Worked there for about a year and a half, and then I went back and went back home and opened a child care center licensed in Nebraska. And I did that for about also 3 or 4 years. I think it was 5 years, actually. And then I got a real estate license. Then I moved to New Mexico, back where I was from, and got another real estate license. So I was licensed in Nebraska and New Mexico. And from there, after my daughter got out of high school, I was the assistant manager for a 500-unit complex in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And I didn't do the bookkeeping there, but I just basically did the managing. And I implemented 2 increases in rent. When I got there, we had a 40% occupancy rate, and I knew that was not going to work with any business. That's not enough. And so I implemented 2 increases, and when we had a lot of students in college, and they would stay a semester or 2, and then they'd leave, come back the next year. And I set up a contract where they had to stay, or they had to pay their rent, or they had to get on a waiting list, because by that time we did have a waiting list. We had 100% occupancy, which was much better, and also we had a waiting list, so that was really good. We kept it at 100%, and I was responsible for that. My manager didn't think that it would work. She didn't think we could do it. She didn't think they would pay it, but they did. And then I went from there to designing jewelry. My daughter and I moved to LA. She was an actress for a while, for about 10 years, and I worked fundraising for the theaters. I worked for the Geffen Playhouse, which is actually owned by UCLA. It's right across the street from the school. And I raised more money than anybody in the history of that theater. I also worked for Hollywood Bowl, and I worked for the LA Phil while I was there. And I worked for an insurance company. A lot of the jobs in LA, due to the way money comes in there because of the entertainment industry, they're contract jobs, and you go in and they say you're going to be here a year, and then you have to find something else. So I've had some kind of short jobs, but I've been employed either in the designing business or in bookkeeping or property management. I went back to, we moved away from LA in 2008 when the housing market crashed. And we moved back there a few years later. First of all, I went to Dallas and set up a set of books for Angel One, Marty Angel, and pulled all I input information for 90 days and pulled all the reports, because he was applying for a $6.2 million grant, which he did receive. And after that, he didn't need my services. After that, he wasn't really going to manage that property, but he was just, they're going to renovate it and sell the property off as condos. So that was the end of that job. I went from there to San Diego and managed a property on Mission Boulevard, right across from the ocean. It was only a 12-unit complex. The one for Marty was also 500, but the one for in San Diego was only 12 units, but it was in probate, and they needed it renovated so that they could sell it. And so that I called in crews and had all that done. It took me about 6 months. And let's see, after that, we did, my daughter and I both took in troubled accounts for bookkeeping in LA, and we used QuickBooks Pro. Love that product. It's very, there's just a lot of information you can put into that. So it was very interesting and fun thing to do. So I'd like to get back into that. And I do have, like I said, I do have a fully equipped home office, and I would prefer to work from home. So if anyone out there is looking for a bookkeeper, please contact me. Thank you.